Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. We talk so much about the energy sector on this podcast, from rising power prices to the pressure on the industry to shift towards greener energy. Today we have a rare opportunity to speak directly to one of the retailers who is on the front line of providing electricity directly to homes and businesses in Australia. Lisa Chiba is the Managing Director of Momentum Energy, which is a supporter of this podcast. Lisa, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to talk about transition to renewables, but first, a lot of people may not know that Momentum Energy is owned by Hydro Tasmania, and I suspect a lot of people don't realise that Hydro Tasmania is actually Australia's largest renewable generator.
That's right. So Momentum Energy, we are a mainland retailer based here in Melbourne, but we are part of Hydro Tasmania. And like you've said, really proud that it is Australia's largest generator of renewable energy. You know, we've been doing that since 1916 when the first hydro power station opened down in Tasmania. So I think it's, people often think of renewable energy as a very recent new innovation, but actually, we have this really deep heritage in it that we're very proud of. Probably the other thing that people may not realise, particularly on the mainland, is that Hydro Tasmania, it has this huge network of hydro-powered stations and dams, and they're connected then into the mainland through this big undersea cable called Basslink that is an interconnector. So that renewable energy is great, not just for Tasmania, but actually for the country.
Okay. We know the goalpost now, 43% reduction in emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Whereabouts are we up to getting there? How much work do we have to do? I suspect it's enormous.
Yeah, we talk about the energy transition as one part of our overall net zero plans. And I think, it's a really obvious place for us to start. So public electricity generation accounts for around a third of Australia's carbon emissions. So I think you're right. We've got a huge job to do across the nation, but really looking at renewable energy and thinking about how we can collectively be leaning into that challenge, I think is really important, because not only is it around a third of those carbon emissions, but we also have the technology to eliminate those emissions today. This isn't something that we need to be solving for and coming up with those solutions in the future. We have hydropower, we have solar, we have batteries, we have wind power. There are lots of technologies available to us. What we need, obviously, is that time and investment, and it is a really big transition that needs to happen. But yeah, I think, it's really exciting thinking about the activities that we're starting to see. I think having those targets and those public commitments at that, federal level is really exciting and is starting to unlock some really exciting conversations. But you're right, it is certainly a big job.
Yeah, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recently warned that countries like Australia need to make much deeper, rapid and more sustained reductions in greenhouse gas emissions to limit global warming. Do you think that what Australia is doing particularly will start to accelerate now?
I think we're already starting to see some of that acceleration. And I guess, where I spend a lot of my time thinking about is running an energy retailer. How can we mobilise all participants in that energy transition, which I actually think should sort of be rebranded to more of a transformation, because it is such a kind of huge endeavour that we need to participate in. And I think, I spent a lot of time thinking about that. How can we really engage and inform every participant, whether that's a business, whether that's, you and I sitting at home thinking about what can we do to decarbonise our own homes and to reduce our emissions and our carbon footprint. And I think that, we're just starting to see that come into sort of the public discourse in a meaningful way. And I think that's certainly, it has to accelerate. But I think, there's really good signs that is starting to happen, which I get really energised by.
Yes, I can feel that. That's great. What is the role of retailers in all this? It's beyond just providing power.
Oh, absolutely. I think, first and foremost, like I've said, trying to help educate and build awareness, because it's a really confusing space.
Yeah.
You've already referenced a couple. There's lots of different commitments and targets and reports and bodies, and, you've got the state policies and then you've got the federal policies, and every company has their own net zero ambition or decarbonisation strategy. And, every second company will have a solution that will solve all of those problems for you at various kind of prices and levels of complexity. So it's really hard to navigate. And, the type of customers that come to Momentum, they want to be engaged and they want to be informed. And so I think there's a real role for retailers to play, firstly, just in that education and awareness and trying to help customers, which ultimately, like I said, is just, you and I and everyday businesses around the country, trying to work out how to navigate that and what the best first steps are that they can take. So I think that's sort of step one for me in the retail space. And then obviously it is starting to think through what are the products and services and the solutions that we need to be offering so that we can help to enable that transition and that transformation and allow people and businesses to participate in that.
Stay with me, Lisa. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Lisa Chiba, Managing Director of Momentum Energy. Okay, so businesses are very much under pressure to transition to greener energy. Businesses now need to declare their ESG credentials. Certainly large businesses need to, and even small and medium-sized businesses are increasingly wanting to and needing to when bidding for contracts. How does energy supply fit into this? How can Momentum help businesses do that?
Yeah, there are lots of ways. I think you raise a really good point. One thing we've certainly started seeing quite recently is smaller businesses in particular starting to ask more questions in this space. And what we believe is driving that is, like you've referenced, a lot of very large organisations have built their net zero plans and they've been very focused on what we'd call their scope 1 and 2 emissions and are starting to now turn their minds to scope 3. And that scope 3 emissions really starts to push you into your supply chain and make you ask questions of the partners and suppliers and businesses that you're working with and understanding and starting to build that into your procurement plans and things like that. And so we're really starting to see that smaller business sector start to question what their role needs to be and how they can respond to some of those, contracting or tendering questions that are starting to come through, or maybe their shareholders or their customers even are starting to ask those questions. So it is a bit of a trend we're seeing where businesses who may not have access to a sustainability team or to, big consultants who can come in and do that piece of work for them are starting to really have genuine questions. In terms of the way that I think businesses in particular can start to think through that, there obviously are a range of solutions, and certainly speaking to your retailer is a great start, whether that's Momentum or someone else. We're all out there really trying to help customers to participate. I think there's some really simple things that you can do. You could conduct an energy audit, have someone come out and have a look at your facilities or your offices. That can be really useful if you haven't done that before, because it could be simple things like some extra insulation, double glazing. It could be that the appliances that you have are relatively energy inefficient and maybe they're time for an upgrade. If you can afford it, obviously investing in solutions like solar panels and batteries. We're starting to see a rise of electric vehicles, even starting to flow through into sort of fleet discussions for larger businesses. And then obviously shifting to renewable energy. So ideally, if you can move on to a product like a corporate power purchase agreement or even a green power product, they're great ways to be supporting that development of renewable energy. But, we often say at Momentum, if nothing else, even if you can just have a think about not just where your energy is coming from, but where your money is going to, and making sure that you are, switching to a company that is supporting renewable energy, just like Momentum, backing Hydro Tasmania and its big plans. But, we're not the only ones. But I think that's a really tangible, simple step that you can take.
Yeah, and can all businesses do that though? Are all businesses in a position that they can access renewable energy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There are obviously different solutions, and renewable energy is an interesting term and certainly comes with complexity in itself. But absolutely, green power is a very accessible government accredited program that gives you access. Or like I've said, you can talk to retailers about products like a corporate power purchase agreement and other things like that. So absolutely.
There's still a perception of renewable energy being more expensive for businesses and households. Is that true?
Yes, there often is a premium, particularly if you're going to associate a LGC or a certificate or a carbon credit or something like that with it, then yes, there often is a premium. But like I said, even if that's not something that you can afford today, thinking about which retailer you're working with and thinking through, well, where is my money actually going, and is it supporting a company that is building out actively new renewable energy projects? Even that is something that I think every business and every household could easily look at and think about doing.
Yeah, that premium, I presume, is shrinking. I mean, I'd be prepared to pay a premium if I was confident that the energy wasn't using fossil fuels, and I think a lot of people would. I presume that premium, though, the more renewable energy, Lisa, I don't even like saying renewable energy anymore, but, green energy, shall we say, that more that comes on board, that premium will fall as well over years, I'd imagine.
The schemes are going to change over time. So there's quite a lot of work going on around the various schemes and what's going to happen over the coming decades. Because you're right, over time, the grid will naturally decarbonise as coal and gas ends and comes offline. So over time, we will end up with a renewable grid and there will be no premium. That is just what we will have. But we're a few decades off that. In the interim, there's a couple of different schemes and there's a lot of work going on around kind of what comes next there.
Lisa, you have to tell me about the virtual power plant in a school in Queensland. It's a great anecdote.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I mean, sorry, I got a bit hung up on all the easy things that people can do to start thinking green and renewable, but absolutely, particularly for some of our larger customers, we've been working really hard on, what is referred to in the industry as a virtual power plant or a VPP. And like you've referenced, we've been doing some work with the Catholic Education Diocese of Rockhampton up in Queensland. Now, a VPP is basically where you connect a number of assets that a customer or even a group of customers may have, and you group them into this virtual system. So those assets might be on the demand side, things like air conditioners, heat pumps. You might have data centers that are really energy intensive. So you think of assets basically that are consuming a lot of energy, but that can be sort of turned up, down, on or off. You can kind of play with them. And then on the supply side, it's obviously things like solar panels and batteries. You can plug electric vehicles in and they effectively become like a battery on wheels. And then all of the kind of energy and off, generally you'll be connected into the grid as well. And then all of that gets balanced out. And we help to manage those assets so you're best utilising your storage and your on-site generation assets. Now, with that diocese up in Queensland, they have solar panels at around 50 of their schools and they have batteries at 7 of their colleges. So they had this really huge investment in assets, which is great. And by coming into this VPP, we're working with them so that they can actively participate in that energy transition. They support grid stability because we can trade in their energy at periods where there's really high demand. So if there's been, say, an outage at a power station and there's a lack of supply, or if it's a really hot day but it's cloudy and so the solar panels aren't getting enough or it's not windy, then we can trade some of their energy in and derive an income for them, which is helping to pay back those assets that they've bought. But also, like I say, it's really actively participating in that energy transition. So it's been a great example. It works really well with those large businesses where they do have that scale and a number of different assets that can be kind of balanced and managed, and can be a really, really great way to derive an income out of these great assets.
Lisa, thank you very much for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thanks so much.
That was Lisa Chiba, Managing Director of Momentum Energy, which is a supporter of this podcast. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.